Like many of you, one of my goals for 2012 is to try to eat a little bit healthier. I've been doing a lot of reading on this topic, and everything I've read so far tells me that keeping a food journal is very helpful in making healthy food choices. So naturally, I stopped thinking about eating healthy and started thinking about stamping and got to work on my very own food journal. The first thing I did was design a PDF file with the words Food Journal that fit perfectly inside the oval stamp from the Organize It Stamp TV stamp set. However, if you don't have this stamp set in your collection yet, you can cut these words out using any oval or rectangle die you have in your collection, and it will still look beautiful as the centerpiece to your journal. While I was working on the PDF file, I thought about some of the other journals and books that I would like to create, so I included those titles in this downloadable document that you can get for free on our freebies page at stamptv.com. Let me show you the tools and products you're going to need to make this project. First, you're going to need the downloadable PDF file, and you will find that on the freebies page at stamptv.com. And what I've done was I've opened the file and printed it here on our 80-pound white cardstock and on our ivory cardstock. So you can see our ivory is just a little bit creamier looking, but it prints beautifully on either one. Then you're going to need a little journal, and I picked this little journal up at Staples. They came in a 5 or 6 pack for just a few dollars so that you can make lots of different journals, or you can make a bunch of multiples and give them away to friends. You're also going to need some pattern paper, and these pattern papers are from the Basic Gray Piccadilly paper pack. I have that paper pack right here, you can see that. And the reason I picked this one for my food journal is this little pattern has some carrots and some cute little a little tomato or an apple, so it has a little bit of food in it, so I thought that would be cute. You're going to need some Nestabilities dies, and I have the classic ovals and the classic scalloped ovals. These are both the large size. The large size dies fit the oval stamp that comes in the Organize It Stamp TV set. Now you're also going to need some ink, and I'm using Memento Tuxedo Black. You're going to need a Stamp-A-Majig, and that is because you are using a PDF file, so you're printing the words first, and then you're going to stamp the frame around the words. So a Stamp-A-Majig stamp positioning tool is a really good thing to have. You're going to need some score tape or any kind of tape that you have in your collection that will hold onto a notebook. I have a Quickie glue pen here that I'm going to use. I have some assorted thinner ribbons. These are all 3/8 of an inch ribbon. This is a great project for all those scraps of ribbon that you have laying around because you only need a tiny little bit of each color. And I have some regular adhesive here. I have the mono adhesive, and this is the dot adhesive. You also need some other tools such as scissors and something to use the dies with, and I'm going to use the Cuttlebug today. So let's get started. The first thing you want to do is decide whether or not you want to print your PDF file on the white or the ivory cardstock. I'm going to use white for mine because, as you can see in the pattern paper, the background is white. Now, if this was more of an ivory or a muted color, more natural, I'd use the ivory to coordinate. And then I'm just going to cut around the particular title that I want to use. And remember, these are spaced out so that you can cut them all out and they won't interfere with each other. You can see here there's plenty of room around each of the words. So I'm using Food Journal, and I'm just going to tape the back of this down onto my workstation. Since I'm using the Stamp-A-Majig, I don't want that paper to shift around. Now I'm going to ink up the frame using some Memento ink, and then I'm going to create the imaging sheet for the Stamp-A-Majig. So let me grab that imaging sheet. And if you've never used a Stamp-A-Majig before, this is such an easy tool. You just place the imaging sheet down, the rougher side up, and then put the tool right in that top left-hand corner so that it's nice and snug. And then using the stamp on a square block, you put that square right in that right angle there and just press down. Now you have the image on your imaging sheet. I'm just going to put that stamp like that. Now you're going to position the image where you want it so that it looks straight. And that looks nice and straight. And then you're going to replace the tool. Now remove the imaging sheet and you are ready to stamp that frame again, and you know it's going to stamp right in the right spot. And there we go, centered perfectly. Now we're going to stamp this image one more time on this patterned paper, and then we're going to cut out and do a little bit of paper piecing. Now when you're doing this part, pick a pattern paper that has a smaller print, not something that has too big of a print, because these little pieces are going to be cut out. They're pretty small, and you want to get some of the pattern in on that piece so they can kind of make out what it is. So there, I've stamped it again. Now my next step is to cut out part of this image on this pattern paper. So let me get the image completely cut out first and get rid of the excess. Save that for another project. Now I'm going to cut around the perimeter of the oval, just on the two sides to there, and then I'm going to cut on the straight line, not the dotted line, right here. And that's going to be my first piece. So that is going to be placed right there with some quickie glue. See how pretty that looks? Now I'm going to do the same thing with the other one. I'm going to cut on the solid line, just around the perimeter of that side, and again on the straight line. And that one will be placed down at the bottom. So I'm going to attach those now using some of the quickie glue pen. And I do like this quickie glue pen because it's filled up with glue, and you can just color like you were coloring with a marker right in that blank space where you want to glue your piece down. And then just pick up that little piece, place it where you want it. And it stays wet for just a second, so you can kind of play with it and make sure it's in a good position. That looks pretty good. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other one. Just color in. And place that other little piece. Once you do this, you're going to want to try all different patterns in this oval. This is a really fun stamp to work with. For those of you that already have this particular set, you've probably made lots of really neat little journals and books using it. So there's our focal image. Now I'm going to cut this out using those Spellbinders dies that we talked about and the Cuttlebug. I'm going to start with the A plate and then a B plate. Then I'm going to lay that focal image piece there, and using the plain oval, I'm going to line that up so that it looks perfectly centered, and put my C plate gently on top and cut. And there is that oval. Now I want a black scalloped frame behind it, so I need to grab that little excess piece that I have here of the black cardstock, and that one you don't have to position because you're just cutting the plain oval, the layer, and pop that one out. And you can see how nicely that layers together. That's a nice look. Now we're going to assemble the book. Now the book's very easy to put together. I'm using the black book here, but these books come in different colors when you buy the pack. So what you may want to do is, if you're using a red book, you may want to make your background paper red to match, or a green book and do the same thing with green. Or if you really like black, what you can do is you can take a Sharpie marker or a black Copic marker or any alcohol marker, and you can color in the area right around the rings. And this top piece kind of shifts back and forth a little bit, so it's kind of easy to get the marker in there. And you can color just that little strip black, and then when you add your black cardstock on top, you won't see any of the remaining color underneath. So I have a couple pieces of paper here, and for all of the measurements for this little book, you can visit stamptv.com, and right under the video will be all of the measurements and supplies used. I've cut 2 panels, and then 2 panels that are 1/8 of an inch larger in black, and I'm going to just layer those together. Something about black up against pattern paper just looks so nice and bright and vibrant. And I'm going to do that with the other one. You are going to want to cover both the front and the back of the book to make it look finished. Okay, and there is my second panel ready to go. Now I'd like to add a little bit of ribbon to this. So I'm going to do that before I apply it to the book itself. This way it's hidden underneath. And this one will go on the back. Now you can see that little bit of gray chipboard, so if you really want to get fancy, you can get in there with a Copic or a Sharpie marker. But I think it looks okay, gray on the back. I'm going to use some of this 3/8 of an inch gingham, and I'm going to apply just a little strip right down the front, just off center a bit. So I think I'll put that there. I'm going to turn it around and secure it on the back. But then what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add a little bit of tape to it. Since it's the front of a book, I really don't want it moving around. So I just added a little bit of that tape, and that'll just help press it down, keep it pressed down while it's in my purse in transit. So there's the front panel. And now the whole thing is going to be applied to the front of the book and the back of the book using some score tape. And you can use any kind of score tape you want. I have the 1/4 inch score tape here. You can use 1/2 inch, you can use inch, you can use 1/8 of an inch, whatever you have laying around will work just fine for this. This is a small project, so you don't need to have too big of a score tape. And I am going to make sure that score tape goes over that ribbon so that doesn't come loose. All right. Peel away these strips. And the final one here. And I'm going to line that up so that it's flush against the rings. And once it's flush against the rings, I know it's going to fit nicely. So there we go. There is my front cover. And I'm going to do the same thing to the back. Apply that with some score tape. Make sure the piece of cardstock is facing the right direction. I love that you can just tear it instead of having to cut it. Quite a little bonus there. Okay, so again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to line it up just up against the rings of the book to make sure it's straight. And tape it down. There we go. So now I have my back cover and my front cover. And now I'm going to assemble these two pieces together. Let me move that a little bit over. There we go. Isn't that a pretty little focal image? And you can apply this with either score tape or any kind of adhesive that you're using. I'm going to put that right about there. I'm going to center it in the panel of pattern paper, like that. There we go. Isn't that a cute little book? Now, to make it a little bit fancy, I'm going to take some of my ribbon and cut going to cut that ribbon just on an angle, and that's going to make it a little bit easier to feed through. But if you need it, you can grab your craft pick or paper piercer, and that'll help push it through if it gets a little bit stuck. So I'm going to start. You want to go in the same direction with each piece of ribbon. So I'm going to go down into the ring, and I need to get it past this little loop here. So it's down into the ring, and then I'm going to tie it into a little knot, like that. And then I'm going to cut this end short, and I'll cut the other end short when I'm all done. I'm going to do another color here, and try to pick colors that are in the pattern paper or that are complementary to the pattern paper. I'm going to go behind that one and feed it through, and again, I'm going to use my craft pick to kind of pull it through. And tie it the same way. So all the ribbons are going to be kind of going in the same direction. And cut that little end off. Now I'll use my red one. They are pretty easy to pull through if you cut them on an angle. But sometimes they get a little stuck, and it's nice to have that paper piercer or craft pick close by. We'll do green next. It's kind of fun picking out all these colors. And like I said, if you've got a little scrap box of smaller pieces of ribbon, it's a great way to use them up. All right. And then I'm going to finish it off. I like to do either 3 ribbons or 5 ribbons. I like odd numbers when you're doing embellishments. So I'm going to finish it off with one more piece of black, but if you really want to get fancy, you can go all the way down the entire thing. And here is the black piece. This black ribbon's a little more slippery, so I'm going to pull it through with that. And tie. Now probably if I was making this at home in my craft room, I would use smaller pieces of ribbon and I would work tighter, but I really don't want to mess it up on Stamp TV, so I'm using larger pieces of ribbon, but you don't have to have quite as much waste as I have when you do it at home. You won't have to work quite as fast. And I'm just cutting all these little ends off in the same direction. And there is my cute little food journal, all decorated. Here's another one that I did, and this one used the Sweet Threads pattern paper pack. That's got a little bit more pink and less red in it, but you can use masculine pattern papers if you want something that's a little more classic. Maybe you're giving it to a gentleman. Or you can use fun kid papers, and you can use one of the other sayings and make it a little daily inspiration or a great quote book. These cute little journals make great motivational tools to help you achieve your goals for 2012, and they also make sweet little gifts for friends and loved ones.